I was always a bit of a misfit in these like big traditional corporate jobs because I wanted to get too many things done and lots of change, and I was pushing and challenging everything.
I'm Hattie Willis, your host, and each episode I talk to an entrepreneur, investor, or startup expert to unpack their hardest moments, biggest wins, and hard-earned advice so we can shortcut our learnings as founders together. Ever wonder what it takes to transform from a passionate leader into a successful startup founder? In this episode, we'll uncover the secrets to building an innovative, AI-powered solution that's revolutionising the way managers drive team performance. Joining us today is Sarah Touzani, the brilliant mind behind Waggle, an AI co-pilot empowering managers with the tools and insights to excel. Building on Sarah's 15-plus years experience in finance and tech, Waggle has already caught the attention of major players like Techstars and JP Morgan. Backed by a talented, diverse team, Sarah has navigated the challenges of fundraising, fostering culture, and forging strategic partnerships to position Waggle for exciting growth. In this candid conversation, we'll dive into the key lessons learned in the leap from leader to founder, strategies for assembling a powerhouse team and aligning them around your why, tips for securing funding and leveraging accelerators to catalyze growth, Sarah's approach to product development that attracts an eager customer base, how Sarah maintained the vision while keeping operations running smoothly, and the advice she wishes she had when first starting out. And we always love your feedback, so do let us know what you think when you've had a listen. Enjoy the episode. Was entrepreneurship something you thought was for you? Was it something you kind of craved? How did you get into that space?
That's a great question. And I'm not sure of the answer, actually. So if you ask my husband, he would say, yes, obviously, you were going to end up doing this. But I don't think I've purposely ended up there. So I started in a very traditional job, I would say. I went to business school, worked in banking, worked in consulting for a while. And I was always a bit of a misfit in these like big traditional corporate jobs because I wanted to get too many things done and lots of change, and I was pushing and challenging everything. And so I think I was a bit odd in that universe, but I was doing okay. As in, my career was like going well, etc. But culturally, I think it wasn't a fit. Although, like in that type of jobs, culture wasn't really a thing that you took into account. And at some point, I wanted to get my hands a bit more dirty. So actually, I used to live in Paris. I moved from Paris to London, joined a very early stage company called Credit Spring when we were just 4 in the team, including the founders. And at that point, very small team, everything yet to be built. We didn't have a product. We didn't really have a team set in place or anything back then. And I got to play as close a role to what a founder would do as I ever did. And that was a lot of fun. And when I decided to move on to do something else, actually, I took some time to think about what I wanted to do next. And I was getting so obsessed with the idea behind Waggle that I kind of didn't have a choice. I had to pursue this. And this is what made me a founder. But I think it's easy to look back and say, yeah, like everything in my life was taking me that way. But I don't think it was necessarily the case. It's just that I'm eager to get stuff done. I'm eager to change and challenge the status quo. I guess that's probably what makes me a founder somehow.
And Waggle, obviously, you've got these two very different experiences of what management and team looks like. You've got the corporate side, you've got the startup side. Is the idea for Waggle germinating over time? Is there a trigger? When does it come to you and how?
Yeah, again, super easy to write a story after the facts, but they were signs that were leading towards it. So first thing is, again, I was hired in that COO role at Credit String because I had my banking and consulting background. But what I ended up doing was like 10% of that and 90% of how do you build a team? How do you make sure the team functions when we're 5 people, then all of a sudden there's 10 of us, and it's not like a one table office type of setup. And then all of a sudden there's 80 of us and the company has changed massively. And you have to make sure that the company is able to go on that journey and build a culture where performance and high performance is central. And that goes through like team management and managers. And how do you enable managers to be that role between the leadership team and the rest of the company? So that's really how it happened. I wouldn't say in banking I had any sense of what's true leadership meant. Even in terms of performance reviews, I think we used to have one a year. We would have one-to-one meeting with our manager once a year after that performance review. In a way, that was like the example of what not to do, not to follow. And then, completely different world where we had room to create something that worked in a very intimate setup.
And were there things that you tried, or I guess common mistakes around management that you fell into at Waggle that you can share with other founders so maybe they don't feel so stupid when they fall into them because they know that they're not alone, or maybe they can avoid them?
Yeah, I love this topic because this is something I talk about a lot. Like every manager I speak to feels like they're the only one facing the issues they're facing. And this is what's prompted Waggle to exist, really. If you're super lucky, you get training. But even that training is, in most cases, very generic or like high level. So, you should be given feedback. Thanks. How do I actually give feedback? And what's good feedback? What's bad feedback? How do I remember that this is the right time for me to give feedback? All of these subtleties and very context-specific situations are super hard to deal with. If you're lucky, I would say, you have a manager that you can look up to and learn from. And if you're not, then you have a manager that you should not look up to, but try and not do the same thing. But books are great, communities, and we have a community for managers that is separate from Waggle to enable this type of experience sharing. It's not something that you can learn from in one day. Mistakes are going to happen, of course, and they are going to have a cost, but it takes consistent practice. It's a bit like going to the gym or eating healthy. It's something that you need to do every day for it to start bearing fruits. And no one gets born knowing what to do. It's a process. No one gets born super fit. You need to go to the gym day in, day out, and then at some point you can lift heavier weights than when you started.
I've definitely seen it with my friends. You know, you go into a management role normally because you're good at your job, at the execution.
Yeah.
And then you're like, great, you're now a manager of people. That's a totally different job.
Completely
totally different skill set. And to your point, you're either given a very one-off, shallow training, or
none.
It's nothing. And it feels a bit like, almost feels like parenting, you know, the way you were describing it, of like, either you have a great role model and you try and emulate it, or you have someone you're determined not to be and you try and do everything you can not to become them. But like neither are maybe the best way of learning without scars, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And there is someone who's paying the price of your mistakes. It's your team. It's shocking to me that we're still doing this the old way we've been doing it for 30 years, which is through content, through someone coming and telling you, okay, you should do this and do that, and like not having any way to take that and apply it straight away. Yeah, I don't know how that makes sense. But you're right. I think there's a lot of parallels with parenting, which is interesting.
Were there any moments at Waggle that you look back on and think, oh, wow, that was one of those oh no moments when it came to people management? Particularly if you talked about you're growing at such a pace. And I feel like that feels almost impossible to do that without some collateral. It shouldn't be, but it kind of feels like it is.
You mean in my previous role, right?
Yeah, sorry, not in Waggle, sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, the informed Waggle.
Yeah. No, for sure. We had people that were, I would say, either we made mistakes in hiring, but actually the truth is a portion of that, but it's also a portion of we didn't manage to onboard people the right way. So they didn't make the cuts after the end of their probation period. But really looking back, I think it was an us problem rather than a them problem.
Was that known at the time, or did it feel like, oh, these people, they just don't get it? What was the attitude at the time?
I think the first time it's easy to say that.
Yeah.
But then when it happens twice, you have to stop and think, okay, no, maybe there's something wrong in the way we're doing this. But I think it's part of the journey. We could have done it better. I mean, it's trial and error. And there's also parts where we didn't know where we were taking someone on that journey. What can we offer them for them to stick around and stay?
Yeah.
But also on the other side is, there's someone who's been with us for ages. And I think the role kind of outgrew them, because whatever you used to do and worked at 20 doesn't necessarily work at 50 or 80. And we weren't quick enough to react and try and see how we could challenge them to help them grow. All of these things happened. I think all of the mistakes happened.
Yeah. And so this leads you to start Waggle. And I now want to stride a kind of fun tightrope between, I both want to pull on your expertise about management, because I think there'll be a lot of founders who are maybe even managing for the first time, but certainly managing at this level, right? Even if you've had people under you before, it's totally different when you're managing a whole company.
Yeah.
So I'd love to go into some lessons for founders there, what you've seen work, what you've seen not work. And then also, I'd love to hear more about your learnings as a founder in Waggle, because, you know, both are true. You've got the management piece down, and that's maybe not where you're seeing the hard moments, but you're probably going through your own hard bits as well. And we love to shine a light equally on successes, but also the hard bits as well.
Agreed. The biggest learning is probably around feedback. I would say both for me personally, but also if I had to give advice, which I'm not like a super fan of, and we can get into it. To someone, I would say, ask for feedback and give feedback. There's an art to it, and it needs to be part of the culture that you're building in the company. So if it's a culture where feedback is welcome and people ask for it, then you learn faster. But feedback is not like what most people think is, oh, this, you're lazy, why are you always late? This is not feedback, or at least not constructive feedback. For feedback to work, there are like models that you can follow to give good feedback, but basically think about the other person who's receiving the feedback. What do you want them to do? You probably want them to change something in their behavior or the way they work. So we need to make super clear what that thing that you want them to change and work on is. So if you say, okay, you're always late, kind of clear, but also they can say back, oh, why are you saying that? I was just late twice last week or something like that. So if you make it clear, not attack them personally, but focus on the behavior that you want to change, rather than to say, oh, you're like, let's say worse, not you're always late, but you're lazy or something like that. Or if you tell someone they're lazy, they have no clue why they're saying that and what you expect from them. So it's more, when you are late, or when you were late last week twice, we couldn't start the meeting on time, everyone was waiting, this has a cost for the company. So the person can get, how does it affect you and affect the company? And it's easy to address what behavior needs to change. So, okay, I'm going to make sure I come in on time from now on. Whereas you're lazy, I'm like, okay, so this person is not really nice. They don't necessarily have my best interest at heart, because I just feel threatened and I'll probably react and want to defend myself. But also, even if I didn't feel all of that, I would have no clue what I should do to fix that.
Yeah. And also it strikes me that I think one of the most, and I struggle with this so hard, so I'm not pretending to have nailed it, but one of the mental frameworks that's helped me quite a lot is this idea of a distinction between a growth and a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
And I would say that historically I was someone with a very fixed mindset. I was either good at something or I was bad at something, and that was down to my innate talent, my innate skills, who I was as a person, and therefore critique I took incredibly personally. I needed to perform highly to get validation. If you critiqued my performance, you didn't like me as a person. I mean, like a therapy session, but anyway, I really struggled with all of that for a really long time, still to a degree do. But this idea got introduced to me of this growth mindset where actually it's not all fixed. Actually, I can change this, and actually I can learn and I can grow. And that for me, while it's really hard to always practice it as a leader, was this suddenly distinction of, okay, well, if you're giving feedback, to your point, there's actually just a really clear distinction of, does my feedback portray something as a fixed feature of a person, in which case, to your point, it's super hard to go anywhere from there. Like, you're lazy. I'm describing a trait.
Yep.
I'm making it personal. I'm making it intractable. There's almost no point, because like, how can you fix it? That's just who you are. Versus, am I giving genuine pointed growth, and then there's something you can actually work on and we can work through together. And if you're struggling, I can help you. But I think so often we're used to being graded on things and given scores that just tell you your attainment. And we're very used to this kind of performance culture. And actually, I think just that simple, it's not rocket science, but I remember hearing it and being like, wow.
Yeah, but someone needs to tell you, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not going to guess that on your own, right? That's the whole thing around this topic. And this goes again to your thinking of fixed mindset versus growth mindset, is that we think that these things come naturally to people. Like the number of times I've heard, oh, but you're a natural leader. And like, no, I'm not. Half of my instincts are completely wrong. And I learned that my instincts are wrong. Like, I probably would do things the opposite way. You almost need to think, oh, naturally I would do this, so I'm going to do the exact opposites, right?
But that's such an important, because I would love to see the data, but that natural leader thing, you say that, and I'm like, I see that in a school report. I see that in a, application for university. I'm a natural leader, head of the brownies, blah, blah, blah. And, but this is something you are again instilled early, that you are or you aren't. Yeah. And you either see people around you being praised for they're a natural leader, and you're kind of going, well, can I have a go?
And also, I think even the way we think about that is like, what a natural leader means in most people's brain is it's someone who's loud, who's out there, an extrovert, who takes a lot of room, a lot of space. Is this, if you think about it, that's why like this thinking of, okay, naturally I would think that's a good leader. I think in most cases those guys are not good leaders, because they don't listen, they don't take feedback, they don't create a safe space for others to participate as well. So is even this image that we have of a natural born leader what a good leader looks like?
And you're right. When I think of a leader, I think of them at a podium. I think of them in front of a presentation. I think about the skill of presenting and speech giving, not about actually what are they like behind closed doors, lifting other people up, bringing people, like what are the people around them?
How do they feel?
How are they leveling up because of being led by this person? You're totally right.
Yeah, because that's what we've been led to believe, I think. And there's a lot of unlearning that we need 100%. To do.
And there's a beautiful book on this called Quiet, which is I can't remember the subtitle, but basically it's like the thesis of the whole book, which is incredibly powerful, is we have as a society just put extroverts on this like plinth of they're the better leaders, they're better for everything. You want to be an extrovert really, even if you're an introvert. And actually it's talking about the hidden, I think it's called Quiet, the Hidden Power of Introverts or something like that. Shockingly, I'm very extroverted, but it genuinely made me rethink so much of what I valued in myself as a leader and what I needed to think about, to your point. Ooh, is that actually the thing I should be valuing and should be leaning into, or does it need to look different?
Yeah, that's interesting. If you're interested in this topic, Juby Yo,
okay,
who you might have heard of, who's an absolute expert on leadership. Check her out if you haven't. But she's an introvert and she does a lot of content around how you can be like a leader and how you can influence people while being an introvert.
I love that. We're going to have to get you to send us your favorite link to your favorite piece of content from her, and then we'll put it in the show notes.
We'll do. Yes, she's great. And like, again, to your point around introverts, extroverts. So I'm deep down, I'm an introvert, but no one knows that because again, the way we define introvert versus extrovert is, are you shy? Well, can you speak to people? Yes, I
Yeah,
can speak to people. Doesn't mean that I can do that all day long. I actually need my me time. So yeah, like it's just words have meaning that gets subverted in everyday talking, and then this is how we get to the point where, okay, yeah, natural born leader, there's nothing to learn if you're born that way, or if you aren't, you're never gonna be able to manage a team. Never, there's nothing to teach you either. So you're losing on both sides. You're losing out on talent that could be great leaders, and you're putting people in leadership roles that maybe are not the best fit for them.
So with Waggle, you're obviously on a mission to change that. And there's a huge amount about the product that is geared towards having lots of different interventions at the right point so that it's not just this one and done workshop. Congratulations, you've qualified as a leader of everyone. What have been some of the hardest points of bringing that to market and growing that as a company yourself? And you mentioned in the beginning, you had this deep love and passion for the idea. Has it evolved? Has it had to change? What have been some of your big learnings along the path?
I think we stuck to core beliefs. So first off, when my co-founder and I started thinking about it, we really focused on the problem, not the solution. So we didn't come to it with, and I think it's easy to say, but we really focused, okay, this is a problem. It hasn't been solved. How can we think about a solution to it that fixes it? And so we started thinking, again, like buzzwords from first principles. One, do we believe this can get solved by one-off training or one-off content? No. Let's get rid of all content. Let's make it feedback based. The whole product has no content component whatsoever. It's like very much a feedback loop based. So we really kept that in place. And then the other part was, it needs to happen in the flow of work. It needs to be something that is integrated to your workflows. We don't want you to spend time, again, consuming content and not doing your work, because no one has time.
No one does it. And we all know I love content. Hello, podcast. But I totally agree with you. We all know. I know many friends and partners who've kind of been at top 4 consultings or whatever and had to go, you now need to do your training and your IT compliance, whatever it is, and you watch them just leave it to the last minute until they're being chased by whoever's told them they've got to do it because they're about to be non-compliant.
And then you cheat, you try and skip to the tests and just do the test. And, well, basically you leave, it's a checkbox exercise and you didn't learn anything is the end of the thing. So so the idea was, it needs to happen in the flow of work and it needs to be completely feedback based, not content based. Anything outside of that we didn't really have a fixed view on. So at the beginning we wanted to structure it around meetings because that's where most of the touch points between a team member and their manager happen. But then, and we relied on people taking notes from their meetings as like a way to get data and be able to give feedback. We very quickly realized a portion of people took notes and another like biggest proportion of people didn't take any notes. So we can chase them forever to get those notes. That's not going to work. And so we started pivoting towards, okay, how can we remove this friction point? And then as we did more discovery and had more people use the products, we learned what people found the most valuable, what people didn't find valuable. So we built entire features that we completely scrapped because no one was using them. So it's the discovery process. I think the product as it looks now provides value and our users are happy, but there's also so much more that we want to build. So it's going to keep on evolving.
And what do you think companies need to think about? So I think tools like this are so helpful and have a huge place. I guess, question to you, can they go into any company and work, or are there things that a company needs to be doing as core around these tools to make them effective? Or not to make the tool effective, but to make the outcome, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. And something we found out while working with companies that had the will to set something up, but didn't follow that with action. as in we actually want to empower our managers. We want to make sure that they have a tool that supports them, etc. But the whole thinking around, okay, what do we expect from our managers and what does good look like, that thinking didn't really happen. So then no one is in the company unless they are very highly self-motivated, I would say. They don't necessarily engage with the process or the learning process because that's not really valued within the company or the teams. When we first started, we had a consultancy component almost to help our first design partners think about, okay, we want to use the tool, we want to help our managers, and we want to build a feedback culture, but we don't have that now. So what are the first steps we need to do as a leadership team to make sure that the second steps work? Otherwise, it's a bit in a vacuum, and basically you're putting the whole weight on the individual manager to find the motivation to do the work and put in the work without waiting for someone to say, okay, that's actually what we expect from you. We expect you to do one-on-ones. We expect you to give feedback. We expect you to grow your team. If that's not discussed, then they're like, okay, why should I bother?
Yeah, so being aware of trying to shortcut or outsource the thinking of what you're actually trying to achieve with this.
Yeah.
So you mentioned there have been features you've built that didn't get used. What were some of the other challenges along the way building Waggle?
I think really, and we're still in it, I guess, as a pre-seed company, is really understanding who's our buyer. When we started, we had a vision of who our end user was. We're still trying to figure out who the buyer is and why they would buy this instead. Because in a market, there's always a tendency to just go with the tool that or the solution that everyone agrees on, which is, again, bring in a trainer who does management training in the company. But like the saying is that no one gets fired for hiring IBM.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So no one gets fired when they bring in a trainer or facilitator to do a management training class. But bring in a tool that is completely different from anything that is out there is quite a leap. So we need to find those forward-looking, courageous leaders that are fed up with the current status quo and are looking to get something that try something new that might have 10x the ROI, but also if it doesn't work, hopefully it does. They need to defend that idea, basically. So nailing that persona is something we're still working on.
Is the kind of sales strategy, I'm presuming it's sales more than marketing, or, how are you finding these companies and these individuals within them who can be your champions and have that political credibility to burn, as it were, or to use, maybe use is better than burn, to leverage at the beginning to get you in and get that faith?
Yeah, two things that worked for us a lot is thought leadership pieces and content, because it attracts the people who think like you. They know what you're about. I don't have a massive following, or I'm not an influencer on LinkedIn of any sort, but I speak up my mind quite freely, and it attracts a certain type of person. So that has worked quite well. It was a great source of inbound requests, especially from people who are experts in this field.
Yeah.
And then those people, if they don't turn into customers or users, they become champions. So they talk about it to others. We had so many great coaches or leadership, like traditional leadership training companies, refer others to us because they are conscious that their solution work better if it's lasts over time.
Yeah.
And the experts in that space get it straight away, and then if you can get them to engage with it and see it as a potential great add-on to what they're already offering, then they do your promotion for you.
I love that. I think it's something more founders should look at, is complementary partners who might be able to do referral schemes, because it's such a powerful way to tap into someone else's trust and network they've built, and you can do the same. And as long as both propositions are genuinely value add for each other, then I really think it's underused by founders. Incredible growth.
Yeah, I mean, and we have inbound from the US a lot. Someone reached out to get a demo a couple of days ago, and on the call, she was like, I need to bring you to this conference and this other conference, and I'm going to
Mm.
write an article about what you guys are building. The response, when you get that type of response, is so exciting and so positive. I mean, it doesn't always go this way, but this is a good example of someone who's going to really act like, as a champion in their group
Yeah,
and in their community around what we're building.
I love that. So the next bit, I last time I straddled the tightrope of kind of Waggle and, leadership. Now I want to straddle a different tightrope, which is your funding strategy for Waggle and also you as an angel investor. And maybe we start with the angel investing because I think that might give us some really helpful context for your funding strategy. How did you get into angel investment? What's been your experience there?
Yeah, I think one of the first things I've done when I moved to London, interestingly, is I started doing crowdfunding campaigns. So I invested in a few companies back then. And I think that was the first little step towards angel investing. In the UK, we're super lucky to have schemes like SEIS and EIS. I think they're vastly under marketed.
Yeah. Just for anyone who doesn't know what those are, they're well worth looking up if you're a founder. SEIS and EIS, two tax incentives for investors, particularly kind of individual investors or angels. And what they do is massively limit the risk of the angel. So I'm going to summarize terribly, but with SEIS, which is the first tax scheme you're normally eligible for, the angel ends up risking between an immediate tax incentive and then a later incentive if the company fails. They only risk around something like 27% in the investment. And then for EIS, which is for the next stage, it's something like 33%, I think, is risked again, total. So this massively changes the risk profile of investing in an early stage, which is why you'll often hear angels saying, I'm only interested in companies that have SEIS available or EIS available. So really worth, if you're fundraising for the first time, looking into those two schemes to make sure that you're eligible. And we'll put a link in the show notes to Founder Catalyst, who do some brilliant work in this space and are really, really helpful on this piece. I really rate them.
It's an incredible scheme. For me, it's one of the main reasons why the UK is the European leader in startup investing and startups. I think last number I saw was the amount of funding received in the UK was the same as all of the rest of Europe this year. So it's crazy numbers, but I think a good portion is explained by SEIS and EIS because it makes it easier for anyone to start a business and get funding for it, like you said. And it's also makes it way less risky for an angel to put some money in and hope for the best, but worst case scenario, they only lost less than 30% of their investment. So yeah, way worth looking into for founders, but also, and again, for founders to do their first checks in friends' companies and support the ecosystem. I think that's how it works best as well. So yeah, I think first getting close to it was through crowdfunding, and then I joined a syndicate called Ventures Together about 2 years ago now, which has massively simplified the process of angel investing for me. It is still a great learning exercise because it's a community of about 150 founders or operators, so all people who have actual startup experience investing together in startups, and you learn a massive amount again from the feedback those other investors put on the investments, whether they say yes or no. You can read their feedback, why they're investing, why they're not investing, and you can start building your own little thinking of, okay, this is what I care about, this is what I don't care about. And I think for a founder, having seen so many pitch decks and so many companies, what they do well, what they don't do well, is also a great source of learning for
100%.
how do you do it yourself.
100%. And just for anyone who's new to this idea of angel syndicates, so as you explained before, they're communities of angels coming together to invest. And normally, and it really does vary by syndicate, it's really worth saying, normally each syndicate will have their own application process. They normally want similar information, but you kind of end up having to rewrite it or tailor it. This is where ChatGPT is your friend. Please don't rewrite every application process. Also, I'm working on something on this, so come see me. But promotions aside, I think a lot of founders say to me, I'm just going to go straight to venture capital because it's the easier way to get a bigger check than going to hundreds of angels. And angel syndicates can be a really powerful way to get that scale of investment. So you're not having to go and ask 100 people individually. You can ask them, or in your case, 150 people, ask them at once. And then what will normally happen is you'll go and you'll do a pitch, or you'll get pre-selected for a pitch and you'll do the pitch, and then there'll be a group there often who have said they're interested in it already. Or how does Ventures Together actually do that process?
So Ventures Together, I think, is a bit different to most other syndicates out there by the pace at which we go through the investment. So we get basically 2, sometimes 3 startups every week. Every Thursday, we get pitch deck, feedbacks. There's always someone championing that deal internally. So it comes through someone from the community. Feedback from that person, why they're supporting that startup. And then a video from the founders to support it. So it's not a live event, it's a video. Then a lot of back and forth in terms of questions. And everyone needs to make a decision by Monday, whether they're in or not. So you also, as a founder, you get very fast turnaround and feedback.
Nice.
And Thursday through Monday it's done. And Thursday again, there's a couple of new deals.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think actually that's quite helpful. The other part of that that's really helpful to hear, I think with founders, you have to love your idea the best. You have to be its biggest champion. But you also have to remember that the people you're investing to are seeing, if they're good angels, such a number of deals, if they have good deal flow. And that means that they are constantly weighing the opportunity cost of investing in you versus someone else, and whether you're a good fit for their expertise and the value they can add beyond the money, and whether your business aligns with the space that they've decided they want to invest in. I think often we forget that there is just so many startups.
Yeah.
And it's hard because you kind of don't want to focus on that overly as a founder because it's quite demoralizing. But also I think you've got to remember that otherwise it's going to be devastating to get rejection after because everyone feels personal.
Again, it goes back to that feedback thing. I think we have a theme here. But feedback as a founder, not only for your people, your team, but from customers, from investors, potential investors, from potential partners, you need to build a tough skin where you're able to take the feedback, find where the feedback serves you and what you can do to address it, but it can't feel personal. And I'm saying this, and I do take it.
Yeah.
So it's easy to preach, but if you think about it from the other side as well, if you're speaking to 150 investors, if you take 150 feedback pieces personally, you're not going to survive. At some point, you're like, okay, fine, I agree with this. Especially when it comes to angel, it's very much often the case of, unless, Index or Sequoia is leading you around, and then any angel who gets the deck, they're not going to think twice. They're just going to give you the money.
Index and Sequoia being 2 massive VC funds who therefore angels go, oh, well, if they're in, it's probably going to be big.
Yeah, I don't need to think about it twice. So unless you manage to achieve this type of FOMO-driven deals, and I'm not sure you want them because you want your angels to feel part of your journey. So you want them to be invested. Then in most cases, the topic or the problem you're working needs to really deeply resonate with a person. You can't care about all of the topics in the world. Like even personally, you wouldn't have started a startup in, I don't know, if you're a product founder, you wouldn't have started a marketplace product because that's not what you care about. Or if you have a pet startup, maybe you have zero interest in deep tech robotics, right? Yeah. So this is the case with angels as well. Sometimes 100%. They will have zero interest in whatever you're building, and that's okay.
Or just not enough interest comparative to their other interests, right? Like I think that's the other thing, is that you've got to be so decisive because you do normally have a limited pot of money that you're going to put in, and you'll have so many more opportunities that interest you than you can invest in.
Yeah.
I want to go to that piece of what interests you as an angel. What are some of the things that have stood out to you? Let's talk about decks for a second, because I feel like I teach a lot of how to create pitch decks, and I often say I'm not willing to give any sort of template because I'm terrified of seeing the same thing a million times, because I already feel like I do and people aren't working on a template, hopefully. So what are some of the things that genuinely stand out to you, or examples that you've seen of someone doing something?
I would say the most compelling decks, regardless of whether I care or don't care about the topic, are when the founders nail the why me and why now. So
two of the most under nailed bits in a deck, I would argue. Yeah.
So if your startup is building, let me think of a random example, food delivery business, then how are you different? What is going to make you succeed where everyone else has failed? As a founder, what in your experience, and it doesn't have to be just on your CV, it can be something that you deeply care about and you researched, and showing that you actually have done the work to figure out that space, that makes you have a position or a view or thinking about it that no one else has.
100%.
And then why is now the time to do it? 100%. Because if it's an obvious idea, then someone will have had it before. And if it's not a product yet, it's mean that person or those people tried to build this, failed, and so we never heard about that product or that company, but they tried it before. So for example, a topic that comes to mind where I think one of my first business ideas, because I had when I was younger, I would have like millions of them and never actually do anything with them. One of the first ones I had, and I think it falls very neatly into this space, is why is there no app that optimizes your journey, your tube journey or walking journey, and your friend, the person you're meeting, same, like tube journey or walking journey, to meet in a central location. Anyone who lived in a big city have had this pain point. You're meeting with someone like, okay, where should we meet? Oh, I'm here. Where are you? And then you spend half an hour thinking, okay, let's figure out where to meet. And it might take longer for one than the other. Sounds obvious, right? But also it doesn't exist because there's probably no way to monetize this. And I'm sure I'm not the first one who have thought about that problem. So again, if we put it from that context of why me? What do I have? What's special about me that made me come to this solution that I'm thinking about that no one has thought about before? Probably nothing. I lived in a big city, like 50% of the global population, right? And because I have no knowledge of how the tube works or anything. So I'm not going to find some deep solution that is like a genius thing there. And why now? Also not obvious. The tube has existed for ages. People have been meeting for coffee and drinks for ages. So the fact that no one has solved this problem to now probably means it's not solvable. But if we come to Waggle, I can show why these 2 points make more sense. I've always been a behavioral science nerd. So I looked into behavioral science apps for ages. I know most of them and how they work, read all the books. And then I managed teams, managed people, have been managed. Okay, I'm not the only person who has done this, but I have thought about these topics a lot. And we're coming at it from a completely different perspective to anyone else. So like that no content piece and making sure it happens in the flow of work is not the typical way to address the problem. And why now? Well, remote work has made managing people harder. Gen Z are notoriously hard to manage, apparently.
I've heard this. I will not comment. I've heard this.
And the fact that we are working remotely and then the rise of AI makes it easier for us to both collect the data that we need to give you feedback on, but also to analyze it and give you that very custom solution that you need. So I can answer these two questions in a way that makes investing in Waggle more of a no-brainer versus investing in where do we meet idea.
It's so funny. Also, one of my business ideas I never did anything with was very similar. Was a way to kind of, it was going to be like a plugin. I thought I could sell it to Zoopla. Was the only way I could see making me any money out of it. Was a way to kind of, if you had multiple flatmates, very, very niche problem, and you're trying to work out where to live, but you knew who you wanted to live with. How do you find the place that someone wants to commute but is only willing to commute for an hour versus someone who wants to commute but is happy for it to be an hour and a half, but they only want one train or two tubes. Anyway, but to your point, I exactly the same, failed on both. I was like, I'm actually don't know anything about this. I have no understanding of it other than have kind of lived it, but I'm one of many who's tried to find a flat with flatmates, and really hard to monetize.
Yeah,
really hard. The only thing I could see is it's a nice feature for someone else, like a Zoopla, and then they should just do it.
Yeah, and if you do it, they'll probably just copy you.
Exactly. And I was like, it's not going to be technically that smart. So, because I'm not technically that smart. If I was very technically smart, maybe it's faster than building it themselves. It's not going to be.
Yeah. And then you could answer the question, 100%. Why me then?
100%. And I think it is a really good litmus test. And I often say to founders, what I want to get in the first 2 slides is a sense of the problem and what you've spotted about the problem that everyone else has missed, or that they've gone about it the wrong way, or that actually the timing is just so incredible. And that why now side is so often missing. And when I see it, I just think it just makes it such a no-brainer. Oh, I'm buying into your logic, I'm buying into your strategy, I'm buying into your why. So powerful. So being an angel investor, you said, has been a great kind of learning experience. You've seen all these decks. You've got a sense of how different founders pitch, what does and doesn't work. What else has it informed about your funding strategy for Waggle, and what is that strategy?
I'm not sure it strictly informed my funding strategy. So we've been through Techstars last year. We've also raised a small angel round last year. We'll do more this year for sure. What I think it's informed is maybe the scarcity, like how much options are out there. Actually, from both sides, like both from a perspective or of a founder looking for angel investors or VC funds, and from the position of an angel investor having access to so many deals. So just not worrying so much about that scarcity mindset, because it feels like with angels, you kind of know there's a lot of them. But honestly, even with VCs, even if you speak to 100, there's another 900 waiting on the list that you didn't speak to yet. From a founder perspective, it always feels, and I've heard it a lot also from friends, like, okay, I've spoken to everyone already. If they all say no, what is going to happen? And there's no case of I've spoken to everyone. Agreed. So you just need to keep on going until you find the person that, gets what you're trying to achieve and agrees. Yeah, I think outside of this perspective, okay, you really need to make it's really a match on both cases, and you can't force it. Again, like a lot of people compare it to dating, but I think it might just makes it easier to grasp. It's like you can't force someone to date you, and you probably don't want to.
I love the probably. Maybe. I mean, no, you definitely. You're right. You do not want to force someone to date you. Correct. Yes.
So it's the same with an angel. If they don't resonate with what you're trying to build, there's no amount of convincing. Would you go out and like someone who dumps you, basically, would you try and convince them to stay with you?
I mean, it's a therapy session, so I should not say yes. No, never done that. Definitely never. That's a story for another day, but I'm very good at convincing people who've dumped me to take me back. Side note. So
I've done it before.
It's a good skill. But you're right. Ultimately, unless there's something that you can resolve there, which is, hey, you don't want to be with me because of this. Oh, actually, you've misread this. I can correct you, or I can work on that. Growth mindset. But, I do think that's so powerful. And I think founders get really stuck in this power dynamic. If I'm going to ask for money, I just want the money. Therefore, I'm not being selective enough of who I actually, like, do I want to date you? Am I into you? Not just, it becomes all about validation. And I think, again, I love the dating analogy. I think it just goes so far, but it's very easy to date for validation. I remember going to a date actually in my 20s.
I love how this is starting.
Yeah. And I was so nervous. And I was like, what if he doesn't like me? And they were like, what if you don't like him? Why are you not thinking about that? You're just thinking about, your own, you might not like him. Let's think about that instead.
And I've definitely been on like angel calls or even VC calls where I'm like, this is not gonna work.
Yeah.
Like, I've politely finished the meeting, but there's no way we can have a relationship.
Yes, 100. And it is, I do think like it is, and we talked about this with Andy Aim, who's an incredible angel investor and educator of angel investors, and he talks about this idea of, for him at least, he requires great vulnerability both ways with his founders. He wants and is the person who they call when they're having a hard time. And I do think you need to at least have one, hopefully more, but at least one of your angels needs to be that person that actually you're willing to go, I feel like I'm messing it up. You know what? I'm really struggling with this.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good litmus test if you find yourself feeling, I think like a bit like, again, love the dating analogy. We're just going to own everyone. You want to go to a date feeling your best self, right? Like you want to put on the nice face, whatever it is that makes you feel good. If it's nice underwear, wear the nice underwear, wear the whatever dress, whatever. For me, it's wearing the heels so I don't look absolutely tiny. But
you're not that small.
Quite often people meet me and their first reaction is you're smaller in real life. But, and I don't want that on a date, so I wear the heels. And I think there's so much to say for going in a way that allows you to feel confident and put your best foot forward. And I think it's the same with pitching to investors. You want to have done everything that you can go in with confidence. You want to feel like your pitch deck looks professional. You want to feel like you've got compelling outreach. And you do need to get all of that right to get the date right. The Bumble profile needs to look good. The investor needs to swipe right. I mean, we could go for weeks and weeks on these metaphors. But I think then in the date, there has to come a point, right? Or at least after a couple of dates, we have to be able to test the waters and be real. And if you're finding after a few dates, hey, I'm still this slightly fake version of myself who actually can't take the heels off for fear of being too tiny, something's wrong. And that's an alarm bell to you, the founder, that this is just not going to work.
Yeah, I think potentially what you're saying, I'm not sure like how realistically, how much this happens because investment decisions need to happen faster. But at least without you having the full vulnerability experience with the angel, you need to feel, and actually I have some tricks to test this, is you need to feel like you can have a conversation and it's not just a one-way kind of thing. Because again, as founders, we get a lot of unsolicited advice. And quickly touched upon it before. And I think there's a lot of people talking about external validation, get validated by giving advice and giving feedback. So a lot of people also do it for that reason. But it can be extremely damaging for a founder or a startup if you get advice that is completely off marks. Yeah. Especially as we tend to feel like whoever this person is I'm speaking to, either an angel or an advisor, that they are so much more knowledgeable than me, that I look up to them. But the truth is they have no clue what you're going through. Like if they didn't spend the time asking you the questions they should be asking you to help you in the right way and just say whatever comes to mind, they don't think about it twice. And I don't think it's like ill-intended, but the way you're going to take it, you might take like real life decisions based on that, and it might throw you off your roadmap. It might get you to pivot to something you don't believe in. Like I've seen this. And this is for me the biggest red flag. Can I have a conversation with this person? Can I challenge them? Are they asking me the questions they should be asking me before stating obvious truths? That's such a good point. So sometimes what I do is I would just challenge or push back on something, even if I don't really believe in it, just to see how it's going to go. And also you're really right in there about, you made the point of, depending on what route you're going down, you can't always expect that you're going to have this kind of back and forth. And I think, if you go into an angel syndicate, it's going to be much faster. Some angels
invest super quickly. Some angels invest without ever meeting you because someone else put in a ticket that they trust. Some people that you might not want to do that approach as a founder, you might want to meet them first. But if they're, going to be really silent money and you just want the money, maybe you don't. But I think it is about trying to work out what's a realistic relationship to have. And to your point, going into that, not feeling like you have to absorb everything they give you gratefully.
Yeah. Because imagine you have 50 of those. There's 50 opinions there.
And they're often conflicting.
Yeah. So how do you then decide what to do as a founder?
So hilariously, we've basically run out of time. And my next question is going to be very ironic, but I think it's still worth asking. So I ask every guest 2 questions at the end. One is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given? So what is a piece of advice that actually has stuck with you and has been the most valuable?
Okay, recency bias, but I would say to stay on this topic of giving advice is ask permission before you give advice. So ask, and also clarify what the person needs. So when someone comes to you and asks for something, is it advice that they want? Is it shared experience and they draw their own conclusions from it? Is it coaching? As in, I'm a coach, so I have this tendency as well. Is like, do you want me to help you find your own answers, which is a completely different approach to let me just tell you how I would do it myself? Or do you just want to vent to someone and someone to listen? And this applies way beyond just work. I think you can have this with your partner,
100%.
in dating.
100%.
Yeah, I would say that one.
I think that's such a powerful one. That is genuinely on my list of things I want to get better at this year, because I think I have a tendency, because I coach and train startups so much, to just switch in. I meet someone at a pitching event and I'm suddenly interrogating their proposition. That's not actually what they want, probably. It's not very, enjoyable. So I love that. And I think also just the flip side, if any founder is listening, hopefully you can use this as a bit of permission to actually do the same the other way. So tell someone, if they're not asking, if you meet me and I forget, not an excuse for me to forget, but if I do, tell someone, hey, I'm looking for this kind of feedback. This is what I'd most value right now. Can you help me with this? Or is that actually not how you work? And that will be totally acceptable. And if they don't take it as acceptable, again, cool. Probably found a way to discount their advice before they give it.
Yeah.
Final question. What is the thing that you're most proud of as a founder so far?
Interesting. I actually never stopped and thought about it. Okay, a cute one. I'm proud of the team. So my co-founder and I have been best friends for 20 years. We met when we were something like 15, and that tells you how old I am. In high school ages ago. So we get along super well, and we managed to switch our relationship from pure friends to co-founders and give each other feedback, which is not easy when it's a friend. And our first hire also was my first hire in my last job, and she joined us 5-6 months ago. So I have an amazing team. I'm super proud of them trusting me to lead them.
Love that. What a beautiful note to end on. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. It was fun.
Thank you for listening. Before you go, please do take a minute to follow so you never miss another episode. We have some incredible founders coming up. And I always love to hear what resonates with listeners. So do drop us a direct message on Instagram @NotMyFirstGuest with any moments that meant something to you, ideas for future episodes, or your own entrepreneurial stories you want to share. Until next time, happy startupping.